Welcome to Artemis Oracle and Tarot, a sacred space for seekers on the moonlit path. Here we hold space for complexity and honour the intuitive, the unseen and the in-between. The cards that I use were designed by me and they feature divine masculine archetypes to assist with introspection and healing. We all have a relationship to masculinity regardless of our gender identity or sexuality. So if you've arrived here, know that you're welcome and there's a place for you. Hi Aquarius, and welcome back to Artemis Oracle and Tarot. I hope you've been well since we last connected. This is your November 2025 reading, and to kick things off this month, starting a little bit differently. I did some free association whilst meditating on your energy, so I'll show you a little bit of what came up through that process, and I also had a look at some stuff that's happening in the stars for you as well. But before we get into any of that, why don't we light some incense and call in spirit, and then we'll jump into your energetic reading for the month. All right. Let's see what happened with my free association. Lovely little sketchy. I also had as I mentioned, I looked at kind of the transits and saw that Pluto, you're probably aware, but others who aren't Aquarians won't know. Pluto is in your sign for the next 18 years, so yay, fun. And I had a look at this, and this is like quite rare. Most people don't experience like Pluto moving into their sign during their lifetimes, because it moves around so slowly. So, we'll only ever experience Pluto in like 2 to 3 different signs in our lifetime. So the fact that you are living it is significant. And I think like it really represents like an initiation, like coming into your power. And like all initiations, something's asked of you, and it's not typically something tokenistic or easy in terms of, you're not just going to have it on hand to like go, oh yeah, I don't need this. It will ask something of you, and it may be something that never returns, if that makes sense. But by the end of it, I suspect that you will recognize that that was for the better. I was thinking about Pluto and, Pluto's connection to Hades as the god of the underworld. And also, the role of like Pluto over this next kind of 18 months as kind of like a doula. If you're unfamiliar with a doula is kind of like an end-of-life midwife. So if we think about like a midwife as someone who helps a mother and a family with the incoming of a new baby or new energy, a doula is kind of like an end-of-life midwife who helps a person and their family towards the end of life with transitioning to our next kind of stage of existence. And I think that underworld connection is like, quite significant, right? Hades and Pluto as kind of like the god of the underworld. They're going to be working with you over this next period to help you with discernment in terms of like what needs to be let go of as you move into your power. I was then looking at the word Aquarius, and I saw these 4 letters, the core, which made me draw these quarters. And then I kind of was like thinking about quarters as a place like we sleep in. It's a rather old-fashioned term, but like I shall return to my quarters. And then also like headquarters, as in like a place that we go to strategize or think about or introspect. And then I thought about like quarters as like divisions or allocations, like, you know, apportioned, and then also the time kind of keeping like monthly, you know, 3 months making a quarter. And as I look at all of these, I'm getting a sense of like what's going to be important for you, Aquarius, is like a certain type of structure as it relates to well-being, making sure that you're grounding, making sure that you're nurturing, all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, thinking about getting enough sleep, putting aside time for introspection, which is why you're here, thank you. And also breaking down big things into smaller things so that they're more manageable. And lastly, you know, as it relates to particularly the business of like personal transformation, making sure that you're timekeeping and you're dedicating enough time to yourself outside of the transformation, because our body continues to run, it continues to require things. You know, our egos continue to need socialization and friendships and all of that kind of stuff. So don't forget that. And that's when I noticed, like the last part, I, us, literally I saw like I, us, like you're inherently both. Aquarius are known for sort of representing the individual and also the collective. And I think your work at this point in time is intrinsically linked to that. And it's about not forgetting the I as you kind of lean into this collective work in defining the us. So that's the energetic reading portion. I hope that you enjoyed that. I haven't drawn any cards for you yet, so we'll see what comes up, but some early food for thought as we lean into the next part of your reading. This month are taking a slightly different tact with the spread as well, so I'm doing a different spread to what was done last month. I'll be doing a simple Celtic cross spread with a slight tweak, and the tweak is that it'll be an integrated spread featuring oracle cards in the 2 center positions, and then tarot cards as kind of like the extrapolation, the cards around. So yeah, something a little bit different for you. It takes me a bit longer to set up, so I mean for you it won't take any time, but for me it'll take me about 5 minutes to set up. So I'll be back in 5 of my minutes, and through video magic the reading will start in a couple of seconds. There we go, simple Celtic cross spread. So what I'll do now is just run you through each of the cards in position, what they mean, and then I'll take you through the interpretations themselves. So here in the center and the card that's laying over it, we've got your current situation, and over the top is kind of like the associated energy that can sometimes be a challenge, or it can sometimes be a support, depending on what the second card is and whether it's reversed or upright. Well, reversed or upright, basically. I know that it's on the side, but reversed is if their head's down this side. Underneath we have the foundations to the situation. So this will typically speak to like an undercurrent of some sort, like an emotional undercurrent, a past situation, something that has like significant influence over the current situation at hand. Over here on the left we have the recent past. Up here is the likely outcome, assuming no change. The way that I do tarot is more for psychological insights rather than fortune telling. So I kind of tend to interpret all spreads as you know, if you don't make any changes, this is what's likely to happen. But if based on the insights, you change behaviors or you try something different, that will always lead to some sort of impact. And then over here on the right is kind of the immediate future, sort of like the events flowing out from the situation. So that's how the spread works, and let's jump into interpretations. So I always uncover these two cards together, and in the current situation, you've drawn the Lucifer card in reverse. And Lucifer speaks to unrestrained individualism, manipulation and vanity, and the fact that it's in reverse typically speaks to like shadow work associated to these things, or the dissolution of these qualities in your current situation, or indeed within your own kind of, I guess, ego and approach to the world. And so it may be that you know, there's been a period of shadow work, or there's been you know, a person in your life who has been kind of displaying these qualities, and you've taken steps to protect yourself, remove yourself, distance yourself, whatever the case may be. And that is now largely showing up as a positive influence in your life, because you have you know, taken corrective steps to lessen the impact of that influence in your current situation. And in the challenge position overlaid, you've pulled the Saklas card, and Saklas speaks to subverting conventions, and also like the healthy expression of rage as it relates to wounded child parts, or you know, I guess unresolved emotional content from our childhoods that, you know, may be kind of like influencing our current kind of day situation. And in looking at these two cards together, like, that's a super interesting dynamic, right? Because often, you know, unrestrained individualism or manipulation and vanity, these can be defense programs that are developed in childhood as a result of insecure attachment type, where like a carer or parent was kind of ambivalent or inconsistent with relation to how they provided care and attention growing up. And so the young psyche can kind of develop a response that's like, okay, well, if care is inconsistent, then I will just, you know, become completely self-sufficient. In fact, I don't need anyone type of thing. And then there can be like a kind of falling into, like, I guess, kind of almost like over appreciation of one's own abilities as a result of that. And I'm also not saying that people shouldn't be proud of being self-sufficient. I think that's absolutely a thing, but it's almost a thing where, you know, a person can become like put themselves on a pedestal and minimize the struggles and efforts of others because they believe that, you know, what they've been through is the most challenging thing. So if that resonates with you, take. If it doesn't, absolutely leave. I've already mentioned a couple of the other possible interpretations of these two cards. So yeah, if it's not the inner child one, you know, it could be one of the others that I mentioned. All right, let's look at the foundations of the situation and see if that gives us any more clarity here. So you've pulled the Chariot in reverse. There we go. And the Chariot, Yeah, it's interesting, especially given what I was just talking about. The Chariot speaks to like a sense of momentum and cohesion that is kind of tapped into when our unconscious kind of desires and mental, our kind of conscious mind, when those two things are in alignment in terms of core beliefs, our sense of self-worth, our desires, and what we kind of outwardly say or consciously believe, like those things are. So when there is high alignment, this is when we step into our manifesting power. This is when we may find that even challenging things, we seem to be able to kind of triumph or calculate and deliver in an exacting kind of way, because there's no inattention that might kind of result in sort of self-sabotage or inner critic kind of stuff that can kind of trip us up. So with the Chariot in reverse like this, I get the sense that you've perhaps been feeling like a bit of dissonance between those things, and it's really hard for us to know what our unconscious, like the contents of our unconscious minds are, or what the contents are. And, in many ways, there is a veil that prevents us from knowing, fully or completely, but it's not impossible to get a sense of, things like core beliefs, things like desires when we kind of study and also make attempts to connect with our unconscious mind. And I think, with Pluto currently doing its thing that it's doing in your sign, I feel like that could be, leading to some of these kind of disconnects, especially given Pluto is in retrograde, I think, until the end of the month as well in your sign, and then it stations direct. So that will hopefully ease a little bit of that kind of internal and external tension. But I think as you go through this period with Pluto in your sign, Aquarius, there's going to be a revisiting of this as you kind of confront, interrogate, and then also use discernment to, strip away or change or reinvent aspects of yourself, aspects that you may have, become attached to. There's going to be periods where you feel like this kind of momentum is slowing down, and I guess I feel like the need to reassure you at this point, like that slowing down isn't a failure or mark on your character in any way at all. It is actually a sign that you're doing what you need to do, which is taking time in your quarters to be with yourself, sit with yourself, and manage through this transformation in a way that both honors the work and the material, but also ensures that you're looking after your needs, making sure you're well rested, nutrition, all of that kind of stuff. All right, let's look at the recent past. Yeah, I mean, wow, this is like a double sign of just exactly what I was talking to. You've pulled the High Priestess here in the reverse as well. And, this, I think, really speaks to that Pluto in retrograde activity, which is disrupting your sense of like intuition, your kind of like embodied sense of who you are, who you've always known yourself to be, and it's kind of throwing you a little bit. The High Priestess speaks to like all of our kind of unconscious and receptive qualities. So this is kind of like our embodied sense of intuition. It's our dreams. It's our, creativity and, sort of undirected, thoughts of reverie and, kind of just anything that's not a direct kind of like directly kind of planned or kind of structured out, you know, thought or action. And yeah, so I mean, in the recent past, I guess that's a reflection of that Pluto retrograde, which, as I said, you know, ends at the end of the month. So hopefully you'll find some respite there. But as it relates to strengthening that kind of connection to our inner high priestess, it's about making time for creativity, perhaps returning to childhood pursuits that brought us joy and were inherently creative, making sure that we're getting enough restful sleep, dream journaling if you're into that thing, or even just like doing some free association around the content of your dreams can be a fun way of like acknowledging the material that comes to you in your dreams, but also it can set up a practice that allows dreams to do what they're supposed to do, which is to help us kind of work through unresolved psychological and spiritual material. You know, people who don't like going to therapy will love hearing this. If you do dream work, it does help to resolve a lot of the stuff that we end up having to go to therapy over, because our unconscious mind is actually designed to help us kind of disperse this stored trauma, memory, kind of stored, you know, negative kind of self-talk and all of that sort of stuff. It does it in a way that almost seems magical because it happens while we're asleep. That's what dreams are for, amongst many other things. All right, let's look at the likely outcome. Yeah, so you've pulled the Nine of Wands in reverse here in the likely outcome, and I think this is beautiful in terms of the Nine of Wands is the wounded warrior. He's weary. He has had a life of you know, kind of fighting his own battles, but also sometimes they're battles that he didn't necessarily want to step into, but felt compelled to, or, you know, indeed perhaps felt as if there was no other choice. And, you know, he finds himself kind of wondering if that was the best use of his time. And, you know, with it in reverse like this, what I'm sensing is that if you lean into this Pluto energy and you, you know, mind your quarters, take rest in your quarters, you know, divide your time and, you know, manage your well-being, what you'll find is that you dissolve that Nine of Wands energy. You don't feel regret. You don't feel kind of weary or wounded. Rather, you feel empowered that you took the time to take a look at what's happening in the cycle and then make choices that work for you. Like, not every fight is one that you need to jump into, and not every challenge is necessarily one that you are being asked to solve. So keep that in mind as you work through this Pluto energy. The world's problems are not yours to solve, specifically, Aquarius. So a lot of Pluto's power comes from the demands that he kind of requests of society, not necessarily of the sign that he's visiting. All right, let's have a look at the immediate future. And yeah, you've pulled, this is so nice. You've pulled the Ten of Cups here, which, you know, in tarot, the Ten of Cups speaks to emotional fulfillment. It speaks to kind of relationships that have, you know, enjoyable and harmonious and fulfilling. And I think that also speaks to like our relationship to ourselves, and that it's one of partnership and, you know, kind of understanding. And that might sound like a silly way to kind of refer to how we kind of work with ourselves, but it is very much like a relationship and a partnership, and in many ways like a contract, you know, where the fundamental agreement is like do no harm. And I think, you know, if I'm getting a sense of any of this kind of Pluto energy and the transformation that you're at the precipice of, It's asking you to take a look at that relationship to yourself and identify the parts that are serving you, and to, release to source or universe or spirit, or to whatever kind of power you subscribe to. Release everything else to that source to manage. You're only here for you, ultimately, and by being the best you that you can be, that's when we find ourselves delightfully but also unintentionally bringing joy, happiness, and excellence to those around us and indeed the world. I hope that you enjoyed your reading, Aquarius. Feel free to drop comments or questions below. I'd love to hear how it resonated. And without further ado, I will see you next month. Bye for now. Well, that's all I've got for you this month. So thanks again for tuning in and watching. If you'd like to learn more about the cards, read the profiles of the divine masculine archetypes, and more, you can do that all on my website, and the link to that is in the video description below. Some insights take time to emerge, so sit with the messages and use your discernment to determine what's for you and what to leave behind. Feel free to leave comments below. I love hearing your feedback on what parts resonated. And don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss your next reading. You might also consider checking out your moon, rising, and Venus signs for additional insights. Until next time, allow the moonlight to reveal your way and trust that you're on the right path. This is Artemis Oracle and Tarot. Divine what can't be seen by day, and behold, with new perspective, that which stalked in the night. See you in the next one. You've been watching Artemis Oracle and Tarot, a sacred space for healing for those on the moonlit path. Join us here on YouTube for monthly tarot readings by astrology sign and deep dives into the imagery and symbolism used in the making of our unique Artemis Oracle and Tarot decks. If having a space to work through the unpleasant but necessary parts of adulting sounds good to you, like and subscribe here on YouTube and follow us on Instagram so you never miss a beat. All links are in the description below.